Hello Rhinos, today I'm going to do a reaction video about a documentary recently aired in the UK called What Are We Feeding Our Kids by Dr Chris van Tulken. Let's get into it. Why am I qualified to talk about this? Well, my name is John Collett, and in March 2018 I got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and within 6 months I managed to put my condition into remission, and I want to help you do the same. So why should you watch a reaction video about a documentary in the UK about what we feed our kids? Well, it's all about ultra processed food. And a big problem when you try to put your type 2 diabetes into remission is dealing with sugar addiction, okay? And the addiction to the food. And one of the best ways to help you deal with that sugar addiction is for you to open your eyes about what has been done to you by the food industry. So any documentary you can watch about food, that ultra processed food, that educates you is going to make you more likely never ever to want to eat it again. So that's why I encourage you to watch this documentary. So let me tell you all about it. So who is Dr. Chris van Tulken? Well, he is famous in the UK. Him and his brother is famous in the UK for a children's TV program called Operation Ouch, where they educate children all about the human body and science and how much fun it is. They do some very bizarre things to themselves in the point of doing this. If you've got children and you're based in the UK, I strongly recommend you watch it. My 8-year-old, she loves watching it. She thinks it's really, really good. Okay, so he decided to do a documentary, and he was going to run an experiment where he ate 80% of his food came from ultra processed food for 1 month. And 20% was going to come from real food. And he wanted to show you how it affected his health, his mood, and how it affects his brain function. And the idea is to see how it affects an adult, because if it's going to affect an adult this way, how is it affecting your kids? And why I think this is important to you is one of the biggest issues I think that people have when they come and talk to me is I say to them, you've got to throw out all the processed food in your house, and they say, oh yeah, but my children like eating that food. And then I have to point out to them that yes, I know your children like eating that food, but that food is what poisoned you. It got you type 2 diabetes, it got you pre-diabetes. So just imagine what it's doing to them now. So why would you keep on feeding them that poison? And I think it is a big thing that people have a problem with, and I think that documentary relates to that in a big way. So the documentary starts anyway, and it has some worrying stats that 20% of children suffer with obesity when leaving primary school, and that 80% of children leaving school now will suffer obesity issues when they are adults. The documentary starts with a doctor doing a weight loss surgery on a man in his 20s. Dr. Chris van Tulken asks the doctor what he thinks the biggest change is that he's seen in the people that he operates on. And he clearly states that they're getting younger and younger and younger. And he says, Dr. Chris asks him, what does he think is the number one reason that this is happening? And the doctor clearly states it's down to the easy access and low cost of ultra processed food. Now I can completely relate to that. You know, when we go to get fuel or we go to the supermarket, the tills are full of chocolate. Okay, absolutely. If I forget to eat, pack lunch out with me, I can't go 15 minutes down the road without finding a fast food place for me to get food. It's so easy to get hold of it. It's incredible. The documentary then goes on to talk about the different categories of food. So they've categorized food. So they've got the group 1, which is the minimally processed food. So this is real food, natural food, which is either fresh or frozen, or slightly processed, like milk. okay, as an example. Now, as a type 2 diabetic, this is primarily the type of food groups you want to stay in. Group 2, this is processed culinary ingredients. So this is ingredients mixed with group 1 foods that are used as ingredients in food. So things like salt, pepper, processed sugar. Okay, processed sugar is in group 2. Okay, that's incredible. You know, so anyway, we're going to get on to that in a second. I'm not going to blow my lid about that in a second. Okay, group 3 is the processed foods that have been altered to make them last longer. So as an example, bread. Okay, bread from the supermarket, sliced bread. Sugar is used as a preservative to keep it going longer. If you don't believe me, go cook your own bread in the house, then get a loaf of bread from the supermarket, put them side by side, and which one goes off the first. Orange juice, absolutely packed with sugar, sole purpose, keep it going, lasting longer. Low fat yogurts tend to be packed with preservatives, mainly sugar. So yeah, they say low fat, it sounds good, but the reality is they're packed with sugar. And then group 4 is what they call ultra processed food. You know, so these foods are chemically put together. These foods have more of the nutrients removed, but they are soft to eat and easy to cook. Okay, there are additives put in to improve the taste. More importantly, they're cheap. These foods take the form of real food. So things like chicken nuggets, ready meals, some types of cheese, cereal, frozen pizza, cheesy strings. Where you know it's ultra processed because when you read the ingredients, they're not ingredients you'll find in your cupboard that you use on your food. They read more like a science experiment, okay? So if you're looking at it going, what the hell is that? It's probably ultra processed food. Now, I find these categories really, really bizarre. And I think, personally, categorizing ultra-processed food in this way is quite a dangerous thing. I don't think it really helps, okay? Because processed sugar is in category 2. Now, there are some things in category 2, like olive oil, for instance, which, you know, you would use rather than vegetable oil or something like that. But still, the majority of these ingredients in there, they're processed food. Okay, it's still processed food, and you should stay away from them as much as possible. So I do think it sends the wrong message. But there you are. That's what they've done. We then next move on to a family, and they're talking to a 10-year-old boy. And I love this lad. He's very honest. And he says, when left to his own devices, the fridge is like a black hole that draws him in. And his parents talk about how, you know, time is a massive issue, because now we live in a society now where when I was younger, only one member of the family had to work. Now both members of the family have to work to make ends meet. And when you've got children and they've got dance classes and all of these things, we struggle with time. And sometimes thinking something in the microwave seems a lot easier than, you know, actually cooking real food. So I completely relate to everything they're saying. And they know it's a problem, because the family goes on to say they've gone through periods where they've tried to just eat real food, but unfortunately it costs a third more than what it would cost if they were eating ultra processed food. And it's just, they struggle to afford to be able to do it. So yes, I do understand that is an issue. They also go on to say that they had a younger son, and they tried giving him a chicken breast, and he didn't want to eat it because he didn't think it was real food. He thought real food came in the shape of a dinosaur, you know, and you know, maybe not all food, but you know the point I'm trying to make. But it's such an honest assessment of what people are having to go through on a day-to-day basis when they go on. So I relate to both what they're saying. The next part of the documentary talks about how eating habits in the UK has changed since the 1980s to the 2000s. So not 2020, okay? So it's been over a 20-year period, but another 20 years have passed since these stats were real. So and it says in the 1980s, 58% of food consumption was made up of natural ingredients, and 26% was processed food, ultra processed foods. And compared to now, where 28% of that food is compared to 2000, where 28% is now fresh and 44% is processed food. We've gone from a society of 7% of adults being obese to 20% of adults being obese in the UK. It goes on to explain that 57% of the calories that the average UK family consume come from ultra-processed food. And in children, that number is 64%. And in adolescents, that's 68%. It goes on to say the fact 1 in 5 families, that's 1 in 5 families in the UK, are eating 80% processed food. The documentary then moves on to finding out what ultra-processed food has done to our children. And Dr. Chris now talks to Dr. Bahan, and they talk about what studies have been done on the effects of ultra-processed food on children. And it turns out there is none. None. Now, currently, we're living in a situation where we have a pandemic, and the world has gone out, every scientist, every country has invested in a load of money to get a vaccine to help deal with this pandemic. Thousands of pounds, thousands of people have been tested with different vaccines to see how it's going to affect them. And they've come up with a range of vaccines which we are taking, which is in the UK is definitely having an effect. Okay? But there are still people out there who feel that this period of a year of testing is too quick, and they're suspicious of taking that vaccine. Now, I want to state to you, I've had both of my vaccines. I'm very happy to take the vaccine, but I do relate to those people who feel it is quick. They might have a point, okay? But the whole point is, at least it was tested. Yeah, it was tested and we complained. But when we've been given this ultra-processed food, 0 tests have been done on how it's going to affect our children. In fact, when it was introduced, 0 tests was done on how it was going to affect us, and we ate it anyway. So we worry about the vaccine, but we don't worry about the ultra-processed food that has blatantly caused an increase in type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, obesity, cholesterol, you know, so many different things. You know, you don't really need to do a test to find out. So anyway, rant over for 2 minutes. Dr. Chris then decides to go on an 80% processed food diet and 20% real food diet for the next 30 days. And the rules are, if he feels hungry, he's got to eat. With the help of Dr. Bahan, he does his weight and his bloods are done, and also a brain scan is done to see how the brain function changes over a period of time. The documentary then sees Dr. Chris eating things like fried chicken and goes on, and he starts doing research into the studies of how this food is created, and he discovers something about hyperpatability or the bliss point. And the studies go on to show that they're more interested in how the brain reacts when people eat the food. Is it soft? Does it make the brain light up into a favorable condition so that you want to eat more and more? Now look, if you're really, really interested in finding out more about this, and I do recommend that you do, because it is a good part of your education, go read a book called Salt, Sugar, Fat, How the Food Giants Got Us. Okay, and I'm going to stick a link in the description below. Click on that link, and if you do decide to buy the book, then we will get a small commission if you decide to purchase it. But for me, it's a vitally important part of your education and helping you with your sugar addiction. Because by far, sugar addiction is the biggest problem you have when you're coming up off ultra-processed food. So anything you do to educate yourself, to give yourself a negative attitude towards ultra-processed food, the more you do that, the better and the easier it will be for you to do that. The documentary then goes on to talk about how Dr. Chris van Tulken's moods change and the amount of food he is eating and the lack of his ability to go to the toilet. him dealing with heartburn, ever increasing weight line, and a brilliant line he comes up with, I just want to wake up not feeling like I have a hangover. I completely relate to this. You know, now, a lot of the time when I wake up, I do feel like I just want to attack the day and, you know, energy. Where when I was on the ultra processed food, it was all the time. I struggled to get up in the morning. Definitely, you know, felt it took a while to come around and get things going. He then goes on to interview someone called Dr. Hall, who has actually done a study on adults who, a big group of them had real food, minimal processed food, the other group highly processed food. And what they discovered is that the group on highly processed food actually consumed 500 calories more than the minimal group. So they ate more, yeah. And the highly processed group put on about a kilo of weight in every 2 weeks. And they ate 30% more quickly than people on real food. Dr. Chris then goes to the Amazon to see the effects of ultra-processed food on societies that have only recently been introduced to it. Now this bit is really shocking, because as we know, the Amazon is a big river that goes down it, and there's lots of small villages and towns and things like that come off it. And he discovered a boat supermarket, which was owned by Nestle, that went up and down the river. They even interviewed the boat captain so that they could introduce, the sole purpose of introducing highly ultra-processed food into these societies. They then interview teachers and families in these villages who talk about the rise of childhood diabetes, health problems in their kids and everything, and the massive effect on the children and the adults in the villages. It's so bad that the Brazilian authorities has advised the citizens of Brazil that they should not eat ultra-processed food. And other countries are beginning to follow suit. Okay, France have actually set up, you discover that France has actually set a goal to reduce ultra-processed food consumption by 20%. And for example, in the UK, there's a law that's about to be passed which stops people from advertising junk food before 9 p.m. So there are changes afoot, and it is beginning to happen. You know, governments are beginning to recognize a problem. But then the documentary goes on, comes to the end of the 30 days, and they go back for the result. And Dr. Chris van Tulken talks about the mental, physical effects that he's noticed. He notices that his mood is definitely down. He's feeling more sluggish. He has higher anxiety levels, heartburn. He now officially has piles and is massively dealing with constipation. On average, he's put on 6 kilos a week, which is 2.5 pounds a week. It's a massive amount of weight. He put on 3 kilos of body fat, which is about 1.5 pounds a week. And so just so you know, body fat is like stored energy. So it's excess energy that his body didn't need. Okay. And he's continued to, if he had continued to do that, he would have put on 6 stone in 6 months. His hunger hormone, his desire to eat, has gone up 30%. And his hormone that told him that he was full had significantly decreased. So the hormone that told him to eat more increased, and the hormone that told his body that he was full decreased. Okay? And his brain was now showing the same characteristics as someone addicted to drugs. Now, that is no surprise to me whatsoever, because coming off ultra-processed food, dealing with that addiction was by far the biggest challenge for me. Okay, stopping eating that food was definitely the biggest challenge. But ever since I have done it, my mood has definitely improved. I have a lot more energy, you know, and life has been a lot better. But by far, it was the most difficult thing. Now, Dr. Chris van Tulken then goes on to interview someone from the food and drinks industry. And he asks him questions about the deteriorating health of people since they've started eating ultra-processed food. And the man's defense is that he points out that there is no studies showing that ultra-processed food affects people's health in a negative way, increases weight or anything like that. But he does acknowledge that people are making bad choices. And he also goes on to say, though he does appreciate things need to change, that nothing will change until the government mandates that it should. I don't have words for this. I really don't. So, the profits, basically, is what he's saying, is far more important than people's health, okay, when it comes to what they're doing. So look, this is my overall view of this documentary, okay. On the whole, I think the documentary is really good. And if you're living in the UK and you've got access to iPlayer, you should definitely watch it. It is a good part of your education for coming off sugar addiction. And any other documentary you can watch about ultra processed food, you should watch, okay, because it's all good to watch. But at no point during this documentary, which was disappointed, did the doctor talk about blood sugar and the effects of eating this food on your blood sugar and how that leads to a massive increase in child diabetes, and educating people on the consequences of eating this food, or the obvious rise and, you know, links and stuff to child diabetes. Maybe because there is no significant proof, you wanted to stay away from it, but there is a lot of evidence that points towards that. I also found it very bizarre that, and I think you got that impression, that they stuck it into categories. So I'm not going to go on about that. I've made myself very clear about how I feel about that. But what I would say, if you are serious about reversing your type 2 diabetes, then definitely watch this. It's important that you educate yourself so that you can start seeing this food as poison rather than the way it's advertised to you as something you do to relax, chill out, because you live busy lifestyles, so carry on eating this food. And I do agree that if you want real change to happen, it does need to come from government. And it's good that certain governments around the world are beginning to make these changes. Ultimately, they won't make these changes until the amount it costs the government in healthcare is going to outweigh what it costs, what they get in tax revenue. And if you want proof of that, this you know, the cigarette, the tobacco industry is definitely, that's where you need to look, because that's why government really changed that. That's why they made those changes. And so it won't actually change until then. But what I do encourage you to do, no matter what you decide to do, is you decide you want to reverse your type 2 diabetes. That you decide to take action. And you know, the reason we call this channel Type Rhino is because, do you really want to be known as a type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic by a number? No, I'd rather be a £6,000 charging rhino with 2-inch thick skin, that when it decides it's got a goal, it wants to charge it down, that there's nothing that can stop you. The rhino is you. It's the ideal version of you, okay? And whatever that ideal version of you is. But you get to decide what you want to do. But make a decision with all the information. Educate yourself. So watch the documentary if you've got access to it. I'll stick another documentary down below called Diabetes the Silent Killer. Please watch that as well. Now I'm going to stick a video there about how to make lemon broccoli. You're not a number. You're a rhino. Now charge.